It is a celebration of a transcendent career, enduring friendships, and a momentous choice.
Today is also a special moment to welcome Mr. Baryshnikov. We would welcome him on any occasion, but today is a special...
For him, it must have been a horrendous decision. For us, we were, in retrospect, have been more privileged to have had the opportunity to play a small role in his life.
And what an extraordinary career his has been. He worked closely with...
True artists are willing to take risks. They will not play it safe. And, you know, an artist has to fulfill their talent or they never have any satisfaction in their life.
He is our bridge from the ballet world of Nijinsky and Pavlova that began this century to the emerging and exciting future of dance in the 21st century.
He doesn't like to be made a hero. He thinks, in many ways, I think he's ashamed that he left his country. And he had a great, great love for it. All the Russians love Mother Russia. They really do.
I was born into the old Soviet Union, a Russian citizen in the small country of Latvia, when the Soviet presence was not exactly appreciated.
At age 16, I moved from Latvia to St. Petersburg, and I was a provincial young boy. Of course, I got extremely lucky. I got the best school, the best teacher.
He was most remarkable. There was an intensity, a containment about him. I saw him originally, it was in Alexander Pushkin's class in Leningrad, St. Petersburg, whatever. And there was a deep seriousness about Pushkin's class. And it was a deep seriousness which was very much reflected in Misha's appearance, his dancing.
It was a very exciting times, and I find that morning when I went to see him, it was a dark morning, and then suddenly you open the door and you enter into a room with someone would be like a sunshine.
He was 19, but he seemed much younger, and his face was intense but totally unmarked, and his technique was brilliant, really brilliant, and yet superbly classical. He always reminded one of the god Mercury, you know, and all those statues. He was perfect like that.
He was a young, blonde, beautiful, strong, very well fit young man, which was Mikhail Baryshnikov, and there he was, extraordinary leaping, you know, and making all this beautiful technical thing with such a ease. And there, my teacher, my son Pushkin, said, you see, he's a wonder, he's genius.
Mikhail Baryshnikov. He was announced like Misha Baryshnikov and somebody else will dance pas de deux from Don Quixote. And I thought, oh my goodness, it's again the dancer from the school in Don Quixote. It's so not interesting. And I put my camera on the knee and began, and when he just ran on the stage, I immediately feel that it's something. Not students, it's already artists.
Everyone was talking about him. He was regarded as the next Nureyev or the next Solovyev. He was big news.
Мимический рисунок. Номер Вестрис, поставленный Кобзоном на музыку композитора Банщикова, построен на сочетании виртуозного танца и пантомимы. Надо сказать, что здесь...
At that time, I was in my, early 20s, you know, my career just started. I was so proud to be a part of the Kirov Theater. Greg was accepted to the company in the rank of soloist. And then promoted practically immediately to the principal dancer, gave all the best education they could give me in a few years, and gave all chances to perform.
He danced with an incredible lightness, an incredible what dancers call ballon. He seemed to skim the ground, and yet he had this kind of very strong, powerful turn. He could spin, but he didn't spin lightly. He spun with a certain gravity. There was this mixture of the aerial and the earthly to him that gave his dancing a very special quality.
He was so important also to Russians because his look like, you know, his jump, we see it look like a fly to the freedom. That's Misha was. He was symbol of person who can be free, even when he's living in a Soviet life, in a Soviet country.
I couldn't yet fully understand the extent of the whole rotten quality of that system, of course. And because I was, you know, 24 hours a day involved with myself, my dance, my roles, my this, my that, you know, it's totally kind of selfish experience like everybody who starts to work in arts. You know, they're all a bunch of very selfish individuals.
He had a wonderful time at the Kirov because he received a new apartment. And it's the beautiful St. Petersburg, which he was in the best part of the city near the Winter Palace. He did have his dog, he did have his piano, and what was very, very important to him, I think all his life, were the close friends.
But artistically and personally, I was not quite satisfied.
The Kirov was very conservative theater, and the people who ruled the company were very conservative people. And Misha felt he would like to go ahead and make something new. Okay, he danced Giselle how many times? He danced Don Q how many times?
It's double life, you know, like everybody else in former Soviet Union, you know, and lived in a life of many different layers, one for front, and there's a life internal, which is nothing to do with whom you are in the morning till the night. Because it's quite always dangerous to reveal yourself 100%. I was never a dissident. I was not a political activist, although of course, I hated the system, but I kept it to myself or to my close friends.
The life made him dissident. All leaders of culture in Soviet Russia didn't know anything about culture, but they rule us.
By Soviet terms, he was living pretty well. The trouble was that his life was getting more circumscribed. As he became more famous, he became more important to the regime, and therefore the security forces were more intent on controlling his life and getting him involved. And
he began to realize that the more famous he got, the more pressure there was on him to be a spy and to join the party. He suddenly became aware that he was walking around with no peace of mind.
Other Russian artists had broken free. In 1974, it was Baryshnikov's turn.
I was a young arts writer for the Globe and Mail in Toronto, and there was a rather provincial company coming who had lifted a couple of stars from the Kirov. And like everything that crawled that was exported from the Soviet Union, they just called it Bolshoi because it sold tickets. The excitement from the beginning was that Baryshnikov was with this group.
I partnered two ballerinas, very famous, wonderful dancers, Arisa Struchkova and Irina Kolpakova. I danced with them, and they probably guaranteed my safe return back to Russia.
The company was mediocre. There was one fabulous moment when one of the young men did a tour en l'air, and for some reason only got halfway around and landed with his bum facing the audience and sort of shuffled his way around, which got an enormous round of applause because no one had ever seen anything like that in their life before.
Every night I went to see the performance. The first night was immediately an enormous success. He was with so much presence and so elegant, and there suddenly you didn't even see his preparation. He was in a second up there.
And it set the crowd wild. They'd never seen anything like it, and people just latched onto him. Well, I went back to the Globe and Mail to write the review, and there was this note to call Patricia Barnes in New York. And I phoned, and she said that I had to get a message through to Baryshnikov because there were 3 friends who wanted to contact him. So I knew the only time I would have any chance to see him was at a reception following the performance, which had already started when I got this message.
In these Cold War days, Fraser knew that the KGB would be watching Baryshnikov closely. He concocted a plan to pass Misha a note in a handshake.
The end result was when the moment finally arrived, I was so nervous that the paper had all congealed on my hand, and I eventually had to, write it out for him in a different way.
The unspoken message in the note was that Misha's friends were ready to help spirit him to freedom if he was ready to go.
Just more and more, I realized that to go back to Russia would be probably more difficult than to stay.
But his time was running out. With the Bolshoi Ballet due to leave in a matter of days, Baryshnikov's window of opportunity would not be open for long.
It was a 2-3 days kind of agony, and I was worried about the people and friends and relatives who definitely would be under the scrutiny of KGB, of course.
The Soviets did not want to lose another favored son to the West.
They were very conscious of what the West thought, and they were very worried about the political aspect of why did people wish to leave here. They had to explain this away to the Russian public, that here was an idol who was obviously, and every Russian knew, given the best that Russia could offer, and had chosen to stay in the West. And it was a considerable embarrassment to them.
It was never premeditated decision. A decision to stay came to me very swiftly and quickly and clearly. And again, at that time, I realized that it's easier to jump from the high mountain to cold, deep waters than it's much easier than to go back to the Soviet Union.
A word is sent out. Misha is ready. A call is made to a young Toronto lawyer who is asked if he would help an unnamed Soviet dancer.
One didn't think twice. I mean, it was just someone, we were told someone was going to defect from the Bolshoi, and it was, having been asked, it was our duty. And so the next morning, I went into the office and began researching and figuring out what to do.
If he won't be successful, he will be in prison or killed or something, I believe. Of course, it was dangerous. Anyway, his career would be destroyed forever if he was not successful. If they catch him.
On Saturday of the long weekend, we received a telephone call at noon saying that the defection was on and that it was Baryshnikov.
And somehow everyone sort of gathered in my apartment. It seemed to be a neutral place where nobody would be suspicious that something was going on. Definitely, he was very frightened and was thinking it through very long and very hard. And I can't imagine making such a difficult decision.
I remember giving him my opinion that he should defect and that he would be granted asylum in Canada, although no guarantees. And he said, okay. And so I said to him at about 6:45, I said, well, you're coming with me. And he said, no, it's the last performance, and I'm going to dance.
It is perhaps the most preoccupied performance of Baryshnikov's career. While he takes one last turn with his Soviet colleagues on the O'Keeffe Center stage, his new Canadian friends draw together the threads of the escape plan.
I guess the first call I got was around 7 when you called me and said, don't ask any questions. Get a getaway car. Which, by then, I figured, I started to cross-examine it, and Jim repeated, no questions, just get a getaway car.
He phoned me and just asked if I would be prepared to pick up a dancer who was defecting from the O'Keeffe Center downtown. I said sure. I didn't know much about Baryshnikov, but it sounded like an interesting adventure.
The tension was unbelievable because we all knew what was going to happen, and because things went very well done, the show started very late. And I know that Misha was terribly worried that perhaps the car wouldn't still be there.
And I picked up Sasha Mintz, who was a friend of Misha's.
And the last performance was something that I will never forget. We were in the audience. I was just screaming myself. I thought that performance was with so much heart and soul. It's almost like saying goodbye to all the people which he actually respects. Nothing to do with the politics and everything else.
He and another male dancer knelt down at the same moment to pick up the flowers that were being thrown onto the stage. They both knelt down and they bumped their heads. And I thought it was a terrific giveaway But then I knew what was going to happen because the other dancer laughed uproariously. But Baryshnikov's face was like stone. I mean, in half an hour, he was going to take the biggest risk of his life.
At that point, the timing was right, and Sasha went down to the theater to meet Baryshnikov, and I just sat in the car waiting for them.
I knew the corner where the car will wait for me, and a few people came backstage to say hi after the performance, and kind of chat with them for a little while. Of course, my mind was racing a bit, and my stomach was in cramps.
Mikhail was there in the KGB waiting to take him to the party. They said, "Misha, come on and get in the car." And he said, "Just a second."
I signed a few autographs, and I said in my bad French probably that I have to see somebody right here, and a few people start to sort of walk after me, and I realized it was fans, and I kind of start to move in the light jog. And a few people start to run behind me. It was a tragic comedy, sort of, for a few minutes. And then I realized I was alone. And I arrived at that point when I saw the car waiting for me, and then the rest is,
And I just drove off. I drove up to Jim Peterson's house. And they were talking very excitedly in the back seat and looking through the back window. I was looking in the rearview mirror just to make sure we weren't followed by anyone.
It was quite emotional, and I had a couple of very close friends waiting for me, and I felt very comforted by their presence.
He looked a little bewildered, to tell you the truth, when he walked up the walk, and Misha spoke very little English at that point. In fact, our first words were in French because he didn't understand English very well. But he did look, he didn't look nervous, but he did look a little, and very grateful, kept saying, thank you, merci.
But this story emerges. As Mr. The government insists it had nothing to do with the dancer's getaway. That's a very touchy point.
Suddenly, he bolted from the crowd, through the line of cars, and was immediately...
By midnight on the radio was already announced Mikhail Baryshnikov defect in Toronto. It's June 29, 1974.
Where is Mr. Baryshnikov now?
He is in Canada.
Why the secrecy? I mean, he's now legally here. Nobody's going to do anything terrible to him on it?
No, I agree with you there, and one can become overly melodramatic in these circumstances. However,
it made headlines across the world, front-page headlines. It was the political aspect of it.
The Bolshoi Ballet Company has proceeded to Vancouver, where it will continue its tour, with another guest dancer flown in from the Soviet Union.
The Soviets are furious. Other members of the Bolshoi troupe denounce Baryshnikov. With Misha silent and in hiding, wild rumors fly about the circumstances of his defection. A Soviet embassy official even suggests he was kidnapped.
Here was someone who was a favored son of the Soviet Union, choosing, quote, freedom, unquote. And what bigger propaganda victory could the West enjoy?
I'm sure you can appreciate that he's very, very tired, and it's just out of respect for his own privacy. to allow him now to get some sleep, some rest, and to recover.
And if you will bear with him for just a few days, Mr. Baryshnikov, I'm sure will be happy to meet him.
Misha's new benefactors shelter him from the roiling diplomatic and media storms. His haven is the Stewart family's country home north of Toronto.
The first couple of days were he was very withdrawn, I would say. I think very withdrawn, and did not communicate with anyone except Jim, really. And Jim was the one who could kind of seem to be able to make him laugh. And, but with the rest of us, he was very, and I think he was probably, he recognized the finality of many things.
I had a sense that he loved his country passionately. And so I felt he was a person who was sort of in a great deal of pain and anguish, and was trying to come to terms with all of this, but he didn't quite know how to do it yet.
He was young boy who had a lot of friends, a lot of love around him, a lot of attention, a lot of people who understood him, and he came to another country. He met people who didn't know anything about him. He had to have new friends. It's not easy, believe me, it's not easy. And he, of course, was very young, and he missed, on one moment, he lost everything what he had before. Even it was terrible life, but the friends were good.
Sometimes loneliness, and I missed some friends. I've been forced to make decisions every day, about my future, my being, where, what, how, why. It was worth it, this and that. It was years of growing up.
Is this political? The whole defection, is it political, or so you can dance somewhere else, or a mixture, or what?
What do you mean by political in this?
Well, leaving one political system for another.
No. This man is apolitical in the sense that being a member of a party or a supporter of one government or the other. He is just a dedicated professional who feels that he has to have these new opportunities to develop his career further.
During my interview in Canada with a person from Canadian immigration who would sort of approve my defection, I said to him that my decision is not a political decision, and he was kind of raised his eyebrows and said, "What do you mean by that?" And I understood how stupid my remark was, of course, because it was a political decision, although it was motivated by my a desire to move around and be a man of the free world, and be free in my mind, and be responsible for myself, and I really didn't like that word defector, because it reminded me something about being defective. It is a kind of military term.
Meanwhile, the international press had flown into Toronto from all corners of the earth, and it was becoming a very big story, and we had to do something to show Misha's position, and that he was safe, that he'd not been kidnapped.
I had been given choice. I remember to give one interview, and there's a list of people, and I said I will give interview to the youngest one, which would be John Fraser.
There was an agreed upon plan. I would go up to the Stewart's farm in Caledon area. We talked, and then I typed it up there, and then we went over it again. It was very important because it was this first, we knew it was going to be widely used and quoted from, so it was important to get lots of things correct. So it was one of the more nerve-wracking pieces I've ever worked on, but it was actually an honor to be able to do it and to be the means of his thanking the country that helped him, of explaining things back to the country he had left.
He was better when he started to get some fresh air, and there was a pond where he would wander out to try some fishing, which he loved. And then he also started to do his exercises again. And that seemed to turn him around. I mean, it was almost as if the weight was being lifted off his head.
He started to get quite antsy after a while. And so the best thing we felt we could do is to get him dancing again.
Mikhail Baryshnikov turned up at a practice session for the Canadian National Ballet this morning. He hasn't danced in 11 days. It was time to go back to work.
The other people in the company, they don't know. I said, this is a happy man. He's going to be so successful. But they didn't know what is on his heart. They didn't know what it means to be called defector. This is a terrible word, you know, just to begin with.
There was no way his visit could be kept secret, so news people were invited to get just a glimpse of what it is that makes Mikhail Baryshnikov one of the world's great dancers.
That was quite the zoo, you know, they really twist my arm to dance for this media. Which is really kind of ugly scene in the little studio. I have to really impress them with a few classical steps that convince them that I can do those things, you know. But I guess that was a beginning of that, of the end, I guess.
The first performance of Baryshnikov's new life would be in the wide-open dance center of New York City. He was about to burst upon the world's biggest stage. Some of his new Canadian friends made the trip south to be in the audience on that memorable night.
The debut in New York, the launch of his career in the United States at Lincoln Center was the emotional high point for us.
It was a magical night, that night of dance, and you could sense in that auditorium that this was one of the great evenings of dance, most exciting evenings of dance of the century.
To dance again with Mikhail was such a pleasure, and to see her after so many years and dance in New York, and it was an extraordinary experience.
The very personal thrill of just seeing the world's greatest dancer do things which people had considered unimaginable. Those memories will always be there.
I'm not sure Jim had been to any ballet before. He may have. But I tell you, there was the world's most ferocious ballet-man created that night in New York, and he was standing on the seat shouting bravo, and there were tears coming out of his face. It was really a spectacular moment in the personal history of Jim Peterson, John Fraser, Nalini Stewart, Heather Peterson. We felt a bit like, you know, rubes from the prairie provinces in New York, but we knew that audience wouldn't be doing what it was doing if we hadn't helped a bit.
Misha would thank Canada in the way he knew best. He would dance. Within weeks, he was back in Toronto, rehearsing La Sylphide with the National Ballet of Canada.
From that sort of first moment of meeting, I realized that this was someone that was extremely deep. In a way, he looked tortured, but he was also just so keen to get down to the studio and start rehearsing.
Excitement and a bit of a panic because I knew I was 26, that, well, okay, well, maybe 10 good years I can dance my bread and butter roles.
The audience started to arrive 6, even 7 hours before the performance. It was the biggest crowd the Forum has ever had. There were 14,000 people packed into the city.
At the same time as they welcomed him, they discovered him and they were excited by him, and he had sort of come amongst us, and we were part of his new life, and we were part of everything that was going to happen now in this great, great dancer's future.
I don't think people who had not seen him before could imagine how this person could hang for so long in the air without a rope on his back. It was breathtaking. We were, of course, had in the back of our minds, wouldn't it be wonderful if he would become a Canadian citizen and make Toronto his home and the National Ballet his company. But that was, of course, not in the cards.
The summer of '74 turned strangers into loyal friends.
As if you're getting more words in than he is. Look at him smiling.
Well, we had fun that night, I think.
Big smile from Karen and from Misha.
Yes.
Bonds built through a shared, extraordinary experience, through generosity and gratitude.
He's a loving person. He's very warm. We don't see each other that often, but, you know, even little messages here and a little few minutes here and there, it's always, I know that I have a few very, very close people in Canada. For the rest, and I'll be always his friend if he wants me to, you know.
Baryshnikov's dash to freedom started him on a race around the world. It was a feast for a hungry man. He danced everywhere he could, with everyone he could.
My eye was already kind of more settled on contemporary and classical dance and modern dance, because I realized how much living in Russia I missed.
His home, his true nation, was dance itself.
He got to explore everything that he was capable of as an artist. He has found an artistic path that gives him back something. And I think that's what drives him, and I admire him very much for that. He is what I consider to be a true artist. It's not about effect. It's not about applause. It's about following a path that you have to follow.
Okay, let's walk for a second.
And he didn't want to show himself at less than his best, and he never did. He moved into modern dance, which he obviously gets a great deal of satisfaction from. And he redesigned himself as a modern dancer. He still has this great stage presence. He still has this great ability to control movement within himself. once had the sense of a kind of eagle dancing. You now have the sense of a tiger prowling, but there's still this great animal magnetism on stage.
You know, I fell in love with the contemporary dance. It's a bit less mannered and more, I would say, democratic and somehow closer to the heart of people of today.
What he would like to say, he brought to the stage. And everything else in the life, it's his private life, and his clothes.
I do a lot of stupid things to sell tickets, you know, to speak to the press, to give interviews sometimes which you don't want to do. And it's nobody's business what your private life contains of, you know. And but there are certain rules in the game in North America and in England and pretty much everywhere. People are interested in those things, and you do those things sometimes out of, well, like I'm doing this interview, out of the respect and gratitude of your country. I wouldn't just do it just because I like it to do it. I don't like doing it.
He's very private in a way which I think for anybody who really cares about him is a little bit hurtful, not to be able to reach the depths of someone you love.
We're going to walk up that sidewalk.
Yes, Stanislavski said that, you know, art demands sacrifice, but usually the sacrifice falls on the shoulders of the people around you, your spouses, your girlfriends, your boyfriends, your mother, your father, your friends, your children. They are experiencing this sacrifice, and you totally obsessed with what you're doing. People who in arts are not the best friends, lovers, husbands, mothers, fathers, and etc. Because we all, you want it or not, all the time think what's next and how I should do it, how should... It's automatic. You can't get away from it.
I think that, you know, he's so close to his children and his wife, and there's a happiness there for him, and is somehow coming back to this city all those years later, and seeing all of us again who were part of that very difficult time for him. I'm sure it sort of closed some kind of circle for him, and he was able to thank people in a way he probably didn't feel he could do at the time.
Great convocation, Mikhail Nikolaevich Baryshnikov.
On behalf of the University of Toronto, and by virtue of the authority vested in me, I have the great honor and pleasure to confer upon you, as I do now, the degree of Doctor of Laws, honoris causa.
Thank you for this great honor and for the chance to come back to the city that played such an important part in my life 25 years ago. I was impressed to learn how many of you come from families where English is a second language. From this, I can imagine that many of your families have experienced hardships of one form or another. I know a lot of what you have been through, especially if you came from Eastern Europe. I hope that people, especially young people who want to leave their homes to try their luck in a wider world, are never again prevented from following their dreams.
Моцарт на старенькой скрипке играет. Моцарт играет, а скрипка поет. Моцарт отечество не выбирает, просто играет всю жизнь напролет. Ах, ничего, что всегда, как известно, наша судьба гульба, но пальма. Не оставляйте стараний, маэстро, не убирайте ладоней со лба. Не оставляйте стараний, маэстро, не убирайте.
TVO presents its broadcast schedule in partnership with Ontario Savings Bonds. Invest in a place you call home. Available where you bank or invest. On sale only until June 21st. And in partnership with viewers that matter, like you.
Television that matters. Show your support for TVO's exceptional programming by joining our membership family. You can become a member of TVO anytime. Just visit us online at tvo.org or call our automated pledge line toll-free at 1-800-668-1414. Become a TVO member today.
Julie Walters and Michael Caine star on Saturday Night at the Movies.
Be my tutor.
But I've told you, I do not want to do it. Why pick on me?
Because you're a crazy man.